What's going on, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to ROMA Nation. I'm AK, your favorite guy, and tonight on this 4th of July weekend, we're going to go over the recent Supreme Court rulings over the past couple of weeks and then turn to our main segment, and it's going to be back-to-back weeks of this versus that, starting with communism versus fascism. Here we go. Thank you for joining us tonight, my co-host. He is the host of the Quiet Part podcast, and he is back for another go. Chris Noski, what's going on, my man?
Howdy. So I saw the intro. There's things that happened in the Supreme Court this week?
Yes, sir.
Oh, and man, you're going to have to catch me up.
Well, that's what you're here for. Scrap is with his family this weekend, but he'll be back next week for a second back-to-back of this versus that. But until then, Chris, where can we find the Quiet Part podcast?
Well, you can find the Quiet Part podcast in a lot of places. YouTube, obviously, the Quiet Part Pod. Rumble should be the Quiet Part Pod as well. X is where it gets weird because I just go off my name there. It's at Real Chris Noski. And, of course, Instagram is at the Quiet Part Pod. So you can find me in all those places and none of those places at the same time.
Hey, awesome. All right. Well, you can find me, the real Roma _AK at ROMA Nation Discord as well. So if you have a topic that you would like discussed here on the show, you can click the link in the description below, as well as like, comment, and subscribe. So anyways, let's get on to segment one. This is the Roma recap of the Supreme Court. So tonight, we're going to go over the recent Supreme Court rulings of this session, and let's take a look at the rulings that were made, why they're important, and what it means for the future of Americans in tonight's edition of Roma Recap. All right, so number one, we're going to go over Chevron deference. You ready?
Absolutely.
Let's go. All right, so Chevron deference is a legal principle that emerged in the 1984 Supreme Court case of Chevron USA Inc. versus Natural Resources Defense Council Inc., and it requires courts to defer to a federal agency's interpretation of an ambiguous or unclear statute that the agency administers as long as the interpretation is reasonable. So let's go ahead and get started today with our first set up. Let me get set up here.
What exactly is reasonable? That's the weird question.
I don't know. I guess it's one of those things. You know how when you get a job and you sign on the dotted lines and it says like, we can let you go for any reason without notice, something like that.
Oh, you mean that we can bend you over for any reason without notice clause? I got you.
Yeah, basically. But anyways, let's tune in here. I believe, what is this? This is Yahoo Finance.
Supreme Court overturned a 40-year-old precedent known as the Chevron deference, which ruled the courts should defer to a government agency's reading of any ambiguous laws or statutes rather than interpreting it for it themselves. So here to explain the potential ramifications of this ruling, particularly on the financial world, we're going to welcome in Leah Dempsey. She's Brownstein's shareholder and co-chair of Financial Services Practices Group. Thank you so much for being here with us, Leah. I want to start just on the kind of interpretation of this news. So as a reminder to folks, this is the idea that, there were limitations within the degree to which lawmakers and political appointees could interpret certain laws. They would defer to experts on each individual type of doctrine and decision. This used to be a bipartisan issue. What changed, Leah?
Yes, well, so interestingly, this came out under Justice Scalia during the Reagan administration in the 80s. It was an interpretation of the Clean Air Act. But over time, I think the conservative wing of the court thought that it became a separation of powers issue where, Congress wasn't necessarily delegating certain authorities to the agencies, but the agencies were seeing a silent or ambiguous statute as the opportunity to promulgate rules that, may align with a certain political party.
Oops.
Which ruled the court.
Sorry, that
What
was my fault.
changed, Leah?
I meant to pause it. So essentially, what I see here are the issues of other people outside of our three-letter agencies coming in and making decisions for them that to benefit just them, the government themselves, and not the people. When you look at unelected bureaucrats, when you look at big business and a lot of these big time corporations like tobacco and pharma and things like that, of course, they're going to want to have a say in how these things work. But you have, these big corporations on one side, but you have nobody on the other making the defense or being able to make the defense because they quite frankly just don't have the knowledge base or are in or don't have the ability to know as much as those agencies do.
So something she said, it used to be a two-sided issue. Everyone understood that there was problems with Chevron, and over the last decade, things have changed. You know what's changed? The understanding that unelected bureaucrats get to make these decisions is scary.
Mhm.
And when you're on a certain side of the political spectrum, you want daddy government to hold your hand and make all those decisions for you. You don't want to, for whatever reason, put those representatives that you elected into a position of making a decision, apparently, because why would you want that? Instead, you want these unelected people. And I can't fathom why anyone would want to do that.
Well, it's not, we don't want that. But as far as the establishment is concerned, it's not like they write these laws and bills themselves.
No, of course not.
Of course not. Because the Chevron doctrine, I mean, it's been a cornerstone of the administrative law for nearly 4 decades. And it allow agencies like the EPA, FDA, and like FCC to interpret them and implement congressional statutes, giving them like very considerable leeway.
Oh, it was Congress, and by extension, the court itself, handing over legislative power effectively to the executive branch.
Exactly. Yeah, so they have ultimate authority coming from the top down. So, but we're going to get into that when it comes to the executive branch on the next part. But we'll get to that in a second. Let's go ahead and continue the video.
Issue where Congress wasn't necessarily delegating certain authorities to the agencies, but the agencies were seeing a silent or ambiguous statute as the opportunity to promulgate rules that may align with a certain political party. And has been a lot of litigation on this issue. I think over 18,000 cases have cited the Chevron deference, and over time, different courts have looked at this differently. Really, the Supreme Court in recent years has not necessarily relied on Chevron as much. They've relied on a new case, the West Virginia versus EPA, which introduces a whole nother issue called the major questions doctrine. But this ruling is significant and will have a number of ramifications for the financial services industry.
Okay.
We didn't even think about that. What about the financial services industry?
Well, it's funny because, most people that would listen to you would listen to me only care about the 2A implications, right?
Right.
They don't understand that Chevron impacts a wide array of things. It impacts every 3-letter agency we have. It impacts all the cabinet positions, because now they have to get approval from Congress to make a law or a policy that's going to affect everyone, that they're going to have legal proceedings around.
Exactly. Right. So let's get a little bit of an idea what's going on behind closed doors. This is from SCOTUS blog. Supreme Court strikes down Chevron curtailing power to federal agencies. In a major ruling, the Supreme Court on Friday cut back sharply on the power of federal agencies to interpret the laws they administer and ruled that courts should rely on their own interpretation of ambiguous laws. The decision will likely have a far-reaching effects across the country, from environmental regulations to healthcare costs. By a vote of 6-3, the justices overruled the landmark 1984 decision, which gave rise to the doctrine known as the Chevron doctrine, or the Chevron deference. Under that doctrine, if Congress had not directly addressed the question at the center of a dispute, a court was required to uphold the agency's interpretation of the statute as long as it was reasonable. But in a 35-page ruling by Chief Justice John Roberts, the justices reject the doctrine, calling it fundamentally misguided. Now, of course, 40 years ago, it wasn't misguided. Because things made a lot more sense back then, and there wasn't the internet to pull people back and forth.
Back then, science was science, and you could trust an expert, right? No, you couldn't. But
right?
it at least recognized that there are experts out there, and they had to be credentialed to be considered an expert. Nowadays, because of the internet, everyone's an expert in everything. Did you know that I am an expert in AI, law, literally everything on the internet? Because guess what? I know everything, or so I want people to believe.
Yeah, because if it's on the internet, that means it's true, right?
Hey, it doesn't have to be true. I just have to make you believe that it's true.
Exactly. So, like, what does this mean in the short term? Because the agencies may face more legal challenges with the regulatory interpretations, but the courts will scrutinize their decisions more closely, which could, slow down the regulatory process. But that's how it's supposed to be. It's kind of like the president when it comes to impeachment. You're not supposed to easily impeach the president. It needs to be a majority decision for a reason, so that it's not weaponized and used against the American people, or in this instance, the president.
I think, and this is something we talked about previously, Roma. I think the founders of the country recognized that the reason we needed a Supreme Court, we needed that third branch as a check, is not because they needed someone just sit there and decide things, but the Supreme Court was supposed to be that conservative, slower moving body that says, whoa, things are moving a little bit fast here. Let's take a minute. Let's really think about it, and then we will proceed. Right. And that never has that been more important than these days, where things are happening 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all over the world, and nobody can keep pace with everything coming through Congress.
Right. So in the long term, we could see a shift in how agencies draft and implement regulations, and might adopt more cautious approaches, relying on heavy, unambiguous statutory language. It can
absolutely.
Yeah, but in the end, what the Supreme Court is saying is that Congress, you need to step up and do your job and stop sending through all of these different packages of BS where, like, nobody looks through it. They're just like, yeah, this looks good. Just, sign it off. Let's go. And then nobody really knows how the law is interpreted.
You mean they're supposed to work together?
That's correct. But for some reason, the last 20 years, something happened. I don't know. But to end this first part of the segment, what does this mean for the FBI and the DOJ?
Hopefully they go away forever. They're not, but I mean, that's the hope,
right? Or at least, but when you think about it, when it comes to like the January 6th cases, is it possible when it comes to the DOJ that people can now step up and say, okay, well, now the interpretation's on us, not on you, to decide of whether it was breaking and entering or whatnot. And, it's up to you, the DOJ, to come in and tell me if whether I broke a law or not.
Well, I think it's going to have a profound impact on the DOJ, just because in every court case that comes through, every judge is going to have to sit there and take a moment and think about, okay, here's the statute. What's the interpretation from Congress? What's the interpretation from our parenting group, the DOJ. And where is that line?
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to see some major changes in sentencing and rulings throughout the court system for several years to come. There's going to be more cases that come through now.
Exactly. All right. With that being said, let's move on to the second portion of this segment, and that is the presidential immunity case. Oh, man, we had a lot of fun with this week. That's for sure.
All hail the king.
All hail the king. Yeah, it's so stupid. I can't believe people actually think that. But anyways, let's get to it.
Earlier this week, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled former President Donald Trump has some immunity in the federal case, accusing him of trying to overturn the 2020 election. President Joe Biden said the decision sets a dangerous new precedent. So just what is that precedent? Casey Decker with our Verified team breaks down what we know.
In the most anticipated ruling of the year, the Supreme Court decided Donald Trump has some immunity from criminal prosecution for official actions he took as president. The 6-3 ruling complicates the ongoing case against Trump for his
correction, not just Donald Trump, but for every other president in the past, present, and future.
Well, it's not some immunity. It is a lot of immunity.
Mm-hmm. No, it really is. But let's finish. Let's see what they say, and then we'll play a little game.
actions to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Critics of the ruling, including President Biden, argued it turns presidents into kings who are above the law. We got numerous questions from viewers about the ruling. Viola wanted to know, does the decision also give immunity to President Biden? Donna asked, does it give the president unlimited powers? For instance, could he postpone the election or bring back Roe v. Wade? And many people wondered about a hypothetical that was brought up repeatedly during oral arguments in the case. Is the president now allowed to order the military to assassinate his political opponents? So let's verify with these sources. First, does the decision give immunity?
Before he answers these questions, you want to answer these first?
I absolutely can.
All right, so I'll give you the first one here. So Biden immunity, does this also mean that Biden is immune from his crimes?
Absolutely.
He is. You know,
the same immunity that was granted to Trump, and it's not really granted to Trump, by the Constitution is there. It hasn't changed.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And just like, you know, how can you not have the president have immunity, but you have governors and AGs and congressional members do? Like, does Congress not understand that this applies to them as well for the different laws that they put into place? Let's say they put in something that ends up, I don't know, killing 60,000 people. You know, do we now get to go in and criminally prosecute our representatives? No, of course not.
Well, consider this. You, me, anyone else goes to court, and the DA really wants you to say something. They really want you to either plead guilty, they want you to, give up information on someone else. They can grant you immunity.
Mm-hmm.
So is this really taking anything away or adding anything? No. We've had the ability to grant that immunity, and if a lesser court or lesser, what's they called, an inferior officer of the court can grant that immunity, how is it not possible that the president wouldn't have it?
Yeah, exactly. You know, because it wasn't like the same DOJ was trying to give Hunter Biden absolute immunity over anything he would ever do. Don't
even get me started on that. Hunter and Joe royally screwed that whole thing up.
Mm-hmm.
Hunter could have been off scot-free.
Not only would he have been scot-free, but he would have been the most powerful man on earth. Yeah. Because they wouldn't be able to prosecute him for anything. Like, that's crazy. But again, you have to remember that there still are processes in place. So if he does something that's unconstitutional, he has immunity unless Congress revokes it from him.
So give an example of where Congress could say, hey, Joe, you just crossed the line.
Well, I mean, they did it to Trump twice, right?
Oh, they did. They didn't seem to do it to any of the other past presidents, which is weird because, and that's another thing. Notice who hasn't come out and given their opinion on this.
Mm-hmm.
All the living presidents before now.
Not a single one.
They don't want this. They don't want that immunity to go away. They all did things that could have been criminally prosecuted.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's see what the answer is, shall we?
To President Biden. Yes, it applies to all presidents. The ruling says, quote, presidential power entitles a former president to immunity from criminal prosecution for actions within his constitutional authority. Second, could the president now postpone the election or bring back Roe v. Wade?
No.
Because so here's the thing. It was not within his constitutional authority to do so. Elections, for example, are determined by the Constitution. Roe v. Wade, it was a court case. That's not within his scope of influence. And it wasn't even part of the Constitution to begin with. How could anyone consider this to be a possibility?
Well, it's because there are. How do people not understand that there are three columns of government, and they all have their own specific responsibilities based on the Constitution? So saying that he's going to bring back Roe v. Wade, well, if that was a court case, that's the judicial branch. That has nothing to do with the executive.
Well, it's a combination of judicial and legislative, actually.
Yeah.
Because Congress has the ability to draft legislation, to even amend the Constitution itself. And it's weird. They haven't done that. Exactly. Why not?
Even when they had the House and the Senate, they haven't done that. Either side.
They're not going to either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But until, the Constitution blows up, Congress still makes the laws in the Supreme Court and the judicial branch, will interpret the laws. Because here's the thing. There is no such thing as a perfect law. There's no such thing as a perfect, maybe except for pedophilia. Those things, those guys, people can go.
But see, that's just it. You said it right there. Congress writes the laws. The judicial interprets. What does the executive do? They apply what is determined to be the law. They enforce it. That is their role.
Yep. But now with Chevron deference, it severely limits the ceiling of what they can do. So yes. I believe that the Supreme Court got both of these right, because not only did you give him more executive authority via the presidency, but you limited the amount of power that he has. So it's like it's broadened his spectrum, but you can only go so far. So that's what they did.
It's almost like there's a check and a rebalancing happening.
Mm-hmm. That's how it was made. But I don't know. I'm so tired of explaining myself on this part. But anyways, let's continue.
No. Giving the president immunity from criminal prosecution isn't the same thing as giving him unlimited new constitutional powers. Currently, most of the power for deciding abortion laws and running elections is held by states. If the president tried to order states to change the election date or allow abortion, there's nothing in this ruling that says they'd have to listen to him. And a president can't just declare new federal laws. Congress still controls that process.
There it is.
And our final question. Can the president now order the military to assassinate his political opponents? After all, he is commander-in-chief. Military action is within his official duties.
Thoughts?
The answer is actually yes, he can do this. However, the Uniform Code of Military Justice says if you receive an order such as this, you are not only allowed, but obligated to call it out and ignore it. Because that immunity that the president has to give that order, in this case, does not extend to you actually carrying out that action.
Exactly. So, because it's exactly that. The immunity is on him. It's not on the people that he gives the orders to. It's not that. I mean, if you're in a international conflict and you get orders from the president to go take out this particular, that's within the scope of the military. All right. But when it comes to American citizens, on the other hand, nowhere in the Constitution does it say that a president can kill American citizens with immunity. Nowhere.
Now, what I'm interested to see, because I haven't seen this video that we're watching, I'm interested to see how they answer it, because, like I said, he has the authority, the ability to actually give that order, and he always has. It's just, what's their take going to be?
You ready to find out? Here we go.
But legally speaking, this question remains unclear. Justice Sonia Sotomayor argued in her dissent the ruling means exactly that. Quote, if the president orders the Navy's SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival, immune. Organizes a military coup to hold on to power, immune. But in his ruling, Chief Justice John Roberts said that dissent, quote, strikes a tone of chilling doom that is wholly disproportionate to what the court actually does today. Ultimately, the courts will have to decide on a case-by-case basis what specific presidential actions are protected by immunity. With your
yeah, so I mean, Justice Sotomayor, I mean, that's just fear-mongering. That's what you're doing right now. You're fear-mongering to get the people in the country, in the press, to say something about it. You know, which is,
Yeah.
I don't want to say that that's that's impeach worthy. I mean, that's dumb. But
well, but you know what wasn't said in this video, and you kind of started on it. The mechanism by which Congress and the DOJ have to then take this step forward and say, all right, the immunity doesn't apply here. We're going to impeach you because you turned a drone strike on American citizens domestically, right?
Exactly.
You gave that order, and that is a high crime. That's a treasonous act. We can punish you here. They'll impeach him, they'll convict him, and then guess what? Then he doesn't have that immunity, and it's been determined by Congress that he doesn't have that immunity. We can prosecute him.
Exactly. What does he think? He's a CIA?
Apparently. If it's Joe, he's old enough, he might actually think he is the CIA.
Yeah, right. But to end this out, where are the arguments on the CIA's immunity? Where are the arguments on all the stuff that they've done throughout all of history, the CIA history in other countries and also in our own?
Come on, AK. You know the CIA is a myth. It doesn't exist.
They don't exist at all.
They don't do anything.
No, they're just a figment of my imagination. All right, moving on. So the third and final case that we went over, I wanted to get away from like the politics aspect, and I wanted to jump into something that has pretty much been in the Supreme Court for nearly 100 years. I think there was something like 34 justices have gone over this particular case.
And none of them got it right.
And nobody got it right. And this is from, let's see, from Justia, the U.S. Supreme Court, justia.com. This is Texas versus New Mexico. And this is about the case that involves dispute over the allocation of water from the Rio Grande River among the states of Texas, New Mexico, and Colorado. The Rio Grande Compact, an interstate agreement, governs the equitable distribution of the river's water amongst these states. In 2013, Texas sued New Mexico and Colorado, alleging that the excessive groundwater pumping in New Mexico was depleting the river's water supply intended for Texas in violation of the compact. So let's get into it.
The Supreme Court has rejected a settlement in a water dispute involving New Mexico and Texas. In a 5-4 opinion, it ruled that the water sharing deal between New Mexico and Texas cannot go through because the federal government still has concerns about New Mexico water use on the Rio Grande. For a little context here, this all dates back to a 1930s agreement called the Rio Grande Compact, when Colorado, New Mexico, and Texas agreed to share water in the Rio Grande. Then about 2 years years ago, Texas and New Mexico were looking at an agreement that would sidestep the federal government. Justices ruled the deal cannot go through and, quote, "We cannot now allow Texas and New Mexico to leave the United States up the river without a paddle," end quote.
That was cute. But anyways, yeah, so this has been going on for 100 years. Why? Okay, so I get it. So let's break it down here, because we move on to the next segment. So in Texas, all right, so it has the biggest population out of the 3 states. It has the least amount of jurisdiction because it's not where the river starts, and has the longest body of the Rio Grande bordering its land. I mean, New Mexico, I can understand, it's a very dry and temperament climate. So of course they're going to need, but how many people are in New Mexico?
Wait, New Mexico's an actual place?
Yeah, it's Mexicans that liberated themselves from Mexico.
That's where we're sending all. Never mind. I'm not going to say that.
Yeah, we're not going to go there. Strike. Yeah, no. And then of course Colorado. That's where I'm guessing the river starts because it flows down towards Texas. So
what was the population demographics 100 years ago when this compact was made?
Oh my God, who lived in Texas back then?
I mean, that's the real question, right? Because you can't predict 100 years out what the impact of your decision today is actually going to be. And the fact that this hasn't updated or changed for the demographics of those areas is kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't understand. Listen, we all need water, okay? And we understand that that particular area of the country does not have a lot of water components to it. So, of course, you're going to have to, divvy up and figure out what's going on. But it's kind of the same thing with California. California had an issue with this a couple years ago, didn't they? With the Colorado River.
Yeah.
In what's it, Lake Mead?
Yes.
Yeah, because they're the ones, because Lake Mead is what supplies all the power to Southern California and a lot of different other places too.
That also Hoover Dam.
Yeah, Hoover Dam. Exactly. So you haven't been able to figure that out in this amount of time, and I'm pretty sure the water has been depleted well beyond repair.
Probably.
At least now for the next 20, 25 years, unless you put in heavy regulations. But Chevron deference changed that. So, but
how much has California contributed? I mean, in either case, how much has either state contributed to actually making this workable financially? Exactly. That should also have an impact on this. Mm-hmm. If California was spending all the money to upkeep Hoover Dam, all the money to generate that electricity that they benefited from, then yes, they have a leg to stand on. Where do you go? How do you make these decisions?
Well, I mean, I think, with Texas and California being the first and third, they generate the first and third most amount of money out of any state in the country. If you want to fix that problem, you should be able to go in and say, hey, I'll make you a deal. I'll come in, I'll fix the infrastructure in order to make that work. But on the other end, this is the deal that we're going to make about who gets what.
The idea, yeah, we have the money. We're going to pay for our rights to have at it. Should be what makes this decision.
Exactly. And I'm pretty sure that they can, put a provision in there to where, if they ever go through a drought or whatnot, then, the state of Texas will be obligated to send whatever they need, whatever resources that they need over there to get that taken care of. Because I know they can afford it.
And part of the compact is they can buy up to X percentage of the rights to having all this.
Mm-hmm. Right. But But anyways, I just wanted to get away from politics for a second. I thought that was a pretty funny, pretty funny ruling. Finally, after 100 years, but just to conclude, Chevron deference and presidential immunity case goes hand in hand. All right. Because while the president has more constitutional authority within his branch, his agencies, on the other hand, have the hard ceiling and now have to hold the burden of proof.
The best things to come out of this Supreme Court session ever.
Yeah, literally. So now the people get to decide how the law is interpreted in outside of what we talked about before, the big business and the unelected bureaucrats. Now they get the bad part of the deal and they can go kick rocks because, it kneecaps all the federal agencies, therefore putting a ceiling on the executive branch. So, for all of you out there that like to play Supreme Court from home, why don't you leave these decisions to the professionals, shall we?
Hey, I have no problems breaking down and analyzing the decisions and what it actually means, but it has to come from a place of honesty and being rational.
Right.
I have to be able to look at both sides. I understand in many of these cases with the regulations that have passed, they probably did the right thing. It's just how they went about doing it that was wrong.
Exactly. All right. You ready to move on to this next segment? Because I've been waiting for this.
I tried reading through your notes on this, and this is going to be a great segment.
Yes, sir. So this is a heavyweight bout. We're pinning two of the most controversial styles of governing. Let's take a deep dive into what they are, how they work, and figure out which modern world leaders are the closest representation on this week's edition of This versus That: Communism versus Fascism. Let's get into it. Let's start with fascism. You want to go ahead and get this first part?
All right. So what is fascism? Fascism is a far-right authoritarian political ideology characterized by dictatorial power, forcible suppression of opposition, and strong regimentation of society and the economy. It originated in the earliest 20th century Europe and emphasizes an aggressive nationalism and often racism.
Sound familiar? About
Yeah, sounds
80 years ago.
Sounds a whole lot like Joe Biden.
Yes, he's been around since the Stone Age.
Although the more appropriate term for Joe is Marxism, but that's not the conversation we're having here.
I don't even think he's that. I still think he's a capitalist. He's just he's on one side of the spectrum of capitalism.
Either way, I don't think he knows the difference between any of them.
No, not at all. So fascism rejects democracy, liberalism, Marxism, advocating for centralized autocratic government and led by a dictatorial leader with strict social and economic regimentation and the use of violence to suppress dissent.
You know what's funny? I exist on X and I'm there quite a bit. You know who gets the fascism title thrown at them the most? Someone who is not a fascist, Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Your definitions speak very clearly here, by the way. So the one part I would say is represented in Donald Trump rejects democracy. Yes, reject democracy. We do not have democracy here in the United States, guys. We have a constitutional republic, and the differences between the two are stark. Democracy ultimately is tyranny of the majority. If you have enough people to agree with you, you can get away with doing anything you want. Exactly. A constitutional republic protects against that tyranny. It says, no, the government's only powers are limited by this document, and it doesn't matter how many people vote for it and want you to do it. You, the little guy, are protected from this.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So let's talk about how it works. So fascism works through a consolidation of power by a single leader or party who often rises to power during times of economic or social instability. The leader or party uses propaganda, state control of the media, and rallies to build support. Let's see. So the leader or party uses propaganda. Who does that nowadays?
Joe Biden.
Yes. State control of the media.
Joe Biden.
Rallies to build support.
Well, that's Trump. That's
That's
Trump.
Trump.
He has a lot of rallies that a lot of people like him for.
Exactly. So you've got 5 key points here. Centralized control, which all power is concentrated in the hands of the leader ruling party. Propaganda and censorship. State-controlled media is used to control public perception and maintain support. Suppression of dissent. Opposition parties, trade unions, and other potential sources of dissent are banned or severely restricted, or trying to be thrown in jail. Militarism. Strong emphasis on military power and expansion, often glorifying violence and war. Ukraine and Israel, and and nationalism. Go ahead.
You need an F-15 to take on the government.
We have F-15s, man. And nationalism, a focus on national unity and identity, often combined with xenophobia and racism.
So all except for that last one, all apply to Joe Biden. Now, part of the last one applies to Trump. The national unity and identity. We are the United States. We are us. We're not anyone else. And that's all that should matter, right? Well, you have that there. Now, xenophobia and racism, those don't actually factor into the Donald Trump plan, no matter how much anyone wants to apply it to him. He doesn't care about any of that. Do you bring value to the country? Yes. Do you exhibit the merit needed to grow what we have here? Yes. Racism and xenophobia aren't part of that equation.
Exactly. Though they're going to tell you that it is, because he wants to deport a bunch of immigrants that didn't belong here in the first place. But
I'd rather deport lefties.
Yeah, exactly. I'll take a bunch of hardworking Venezuelans and I'll trade them easily. Easily trade them.
Can I put Whoopi and Joy on top of that list?
Oh, they're the first to go. Yeah, but you did say something, which is the focus on national unity and identity, and caring about what you can do for your country. Somebody famous quote by a Democratic president: "It's not for what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country."
Yeah, the CIA took care of that problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Chevron deference, CIA. Screw you. Anyways, so now we've got the rise and fall of fascist leaders. So let's go ahead and get into it. So as I get this tab open, and I didn't because I deleted it. So now I'm going to have to bring it back up again.
Oh, man. Why would you do that?
I know, right? What's wrong with me? I suck. There it is. All right. Here we go.
It's 1902. A young man by the name of Benito Mussolini moves from Italy to Switzerland to avoid military service. He gets big into socialism, working for trade unions, writing for socialist newspapers, advocating a violent overthrow of European monarchies, the whole shebang. This gets him in a bit of trouble with the Swiss police, so he gets arrested, sent back to Italy, set free, returns to Switzerland, is arrested again, goes back to Italy again, completes his military service after previously avoiding it, and then after a brief stint as an elementary school teacher, he finally returns to work as an avid socialist. His speeches and journalistic abilities made him famous among Italian socialists. He was anti-war, so when Italy colonized Libya in 1910, he rioted and got arrested. Then World War I came along, and once again he protested Italy's involvement. But then he thought, wait a minute, this war could bring about the social climate needed to overthrow European monarchies and bring about the socialist revolution everywhere. And suddenly he was pro-war. But his fellow socialists didn't like his new pro-war stance, so they kicked him out of the party. So then he said, you know what? I'm done with socialism. We need something new, not based on class divisions tearing us apart, but based on unity through nationality. We'll conquer the Mediterranean and reunite all Italian peoples just like the days of the Roman Empire. I'll call it Fascismo, and it will guide the Italian nation to greatness. That's all well and good, Mr. Mussolini, but what kind of haircut am I giving you? Let's go with bold.
Oh man, that was great.
I'm offended as someone who doesn't get a choice in that haircut style.
Don't worry, I'll be there in about 2 or 3 years. This is called my insecurity helmet. But anyways, So obviously, you got Mussolini. He founded the Italian Fascist Party in 1919, exploiting economic turmoil and social unrest. He promised to restore Italy's power and glory in 1922. He led the March on Rome, which resulted in King Victor Emmanuel III inviting Mussolini to a form of government. By 1925, Mussolini had established a dictatorial regime. So that was on his rise. Now, on his fall, Mussolini alliance with Nazi Germany during World War II led military defeats and a loss of support. In 1943, he was disposed and arrested. Although rescued by German forces, his second stint in power was short-lived. In 1945, as the Allies advanced into Italy, Mussolini was captured and executed by Italian partisans.
Wow. So Joe's got something to look forward to here. No, really, he wanted Italy to be strong. He wanted the Italy of today's old, and I understand that. Going back and identifying the areas where your national identity was great, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with saying here in America, the 1950s, we had a major economic boom, the likes of which I don't think we're ever going to see again, truly, despite the rising stock market as we have it now. All Americans in 1950s were doing great, and bad things happened, in 64, around the time that one fella got taken care of by the CIA. Other things were happening to take away from that growth that we saw.
Yeah, and I think we finally got to see the end of that during COVID.
I hope so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, but you have to remember, like, basically what they did is they took whatever growth that we had and either took it for themselves or they gave it away.
Well, they took it for themselves. They don't give anything away.
Right. Yeah.
That's way too altruistic there.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's move on to our next fascist dictator.
Oh, here's everyone's favorite. They always get it wrong. This isn't the worst one.
He's missing the mustache.
Look at this baby. So gentle, so innocent. You'd think this child would grow up to become a good man, an honest man. Well, think again. Hitler was born Adolphus Hitler in 1889 in a small town in Austria-Hungary. His father, Alois Schicklgruber, was born out of wedlock, but eventually changed his name to that of his stepfather, becoming Alois Hitler. Alois was a mid-level customs officer.
Pause it, Roma. Go back to what his dad's name was.
Oh, man.
In Austria-Hungary. His father, Alois Schicklgruber, was born out of...
Yeah, I'd change that name too.
Yeah, right? Jesus Christ. Take a look at the Schicklgrubers.
wedlock, but eventually changed his name to that of his stepfather, becoming Alois Hitler. Alois was a mid-level Austrian customs officer, not really rolling in cash, but certainly rolling in women. He married a rich, older lady, but then immediately started having affairs, including one with a much younger house servant. A few years later, he left his sick wife to be with his mistress, but since the Catholic Church didn't allow divorce at the time, he couldn't marry her. So he waited for his old wife to die and had a child in the meantime. Then his wife died, so he married his mistress and had another child. But then his new wife got sick, so he employed his much, much younger cousin, Clara, to take care of her. Then when his new wife died, he immediately got Clara, his cousin, pregnant, and then married her. In that order, you rock star. Clara and Alois had 3 children together, who all tragically died while in infancy. So when the 4th child, Adolf, came along, Clara spoiled him rotten. The Hitlers had 2 more kids, and the family moved around a few times, meaning Adolf had to attend 5 different elementary schools. Adolf's father was strict, quick to anger, and took most of it out on the eldest son until he had enough and ran away at the age of 14, leaving 7-year-old Adolf to do most of the chores and get berated by his father. The result was a difficult relationship with his dad while he was super attached to his mother, who worried over him and his health excessively. Hitler did well in school at first. His grades were good and his teacher...
Who did?
I think Freud had a word for that.
Yeah, right. We'll get back to that video in a second. But obviously the superstar of World War II, Adolf Hitler, joined the National Socialist German Workers' Party the Nazi Party In 1919, he became its first leader in 1921, capitalized on post-World War I economic hardship, national humiliation, and fear of communism. After a failed coup in 1923, he used legal means to gain power, becoming chancellor in 1933 following the Reichstag fire. He used emergency powers to eliminate opposition and establish a totalitarian regime.
Still, he was disappointed in himself. He had high standards. He was trying to keep up with the standards of Stalin and Mao, and he couldn't do it.
Just couldn't do it. Not at all. Well, let's continue.
Teachers praised him. He was popular with the other kids and enjoyed gathering them together to play war games. He also loved reading and particularly liked stories about cowboys and Indians.
What does I say? Bro, who made this video? Who made this video?
Oh, wow. Where'd you find this?
This is great. I want to keep watching.
As he grew older, though, he started to get into trouble. He was caught smoking once, organized a raid on a local orchard, tormented his pro-Austria religion teacher with symbolic gestures, displaying his allegiance to the idea of united Germanic people under a greater German state in defiance of Habsburg Austria. You know, the usual. All of this enraged Adolf's father, who punished him severely. The area of Austria-Hungary that Hitler lived in was once part of the German Confederation, and many of the people who lived there considered themselves to be German. Adolf tended to just go against whatever his father said, and since his father was an Austrian public official, Hitler got big into German nationalism. This enraged Adolf's father, who punished him severely. Around this time, a family tragedy struck. His 6-year-old brother...
I'm beginning to think he just secretly liked the spankings.
I mean, there are some other information about him that we didn't really know about, you know, that were kind of rumors. But you know that we'll just leave it at that.
Brother, whom he loved a lot, died of measles when Adolf was 10 and was buried in the cemetery.
You guys didn't know this is oversimplified clips on YouTube. This guy is amazing. He does a lot of short cartoon content and does very good explanations on a lot of history. So you guys should check him out.
Just across from their home. Around this time, neighbors reported a change in the young boy. Strange behaviors such as talking to trees and staying up late staring at the stars from the cemetery walls. He lost interest in religion and his school grades started to decline, which enraged his father, who punished him severely. It also didn't help that he had just entered high school, and the cool city boys treated him like a rural peasant. He had to repeat a grade and had little interest in most school subjects, instead spending his time reading and drawing, which he was quite good at. One day his father said, "Son, someday you'll be a big balls public official like me." And Adolf replied, "No, father, I'm going to become an artist and soar high above the clouds with the eagles." This enraged his father, but by this time he was an old-ass man, so he just sort of let it go. And then died of a lung hemorrhage. Hitler just about
one
passed
more
his final
spanking would have
semester.
fixed this.
It would have. That was it. That was it.
That was the turning point. One more spanking, and he'd have been like, "All right, fine. I'm not going to be an artist, but I'm going to be a good leader."
Yep. But no. All right. Continue.
And celebrated in the
We're
typical way
almost done,
by
guys.
getting blackout drunk and wiping his ass with the certificate. However, he didn't take the overall final school exam, instead just dropping out. The now 16-year-old boy was unemployed, without much purpose in life, and for the next 3 years, he stayed that way. He spent most of his time at the opera with his only friend, August Kubizek. Kubizek later wrote his memories of the young Hitler, and said he was passionately interested in many things, felt he was in many ways better than others his age, was quick to anger just like his father, and an incredible speaker once he was ranting. When he was 18, he said a very sad goodbye to his mother and went to Vienna to take the entrance exam for art school. He failed. Soon after, he had to return home. His mother was sick, and her health was rapidly deteriorating. Hitler stayed by her side, and when she eventually died, the family doctor said he had never seen someone so overwhelmed with grief as Hitler was. Then Hitler returned to Vienna, still hoping to find a career in the arts, but he never did. Instead, without parental support, Hitler ended up on the streets. Now in his early 20s, he spent a few rough years living in and out of homeless shelters, making what little he could from selling postcards he painted. It's hard to pinpoint exactly when and how Hitler's extreme ideological beliefs formed, but his time in Vienna would have certainly played a role. Anti-Semitism was widespread.
Well, I mean, if you really think about it, you know, first you were abused by your father, you lost your brother, you lost your mother at a young age. You really didn't have any guidance. Like, So at some point there had to be like a um he somebody had to take him under his wing. I think that's what they were talking about here.
Yeah, he didn't have an actual role. I mean, he truly never had a role model growing up. All he had was an abusive father, and that absolutely shaped him.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, there were probably a number of people in his life through his 20s that could have actually taken him under their wing and provided the guidance that he needed. He was a good speaker. Hate the man all you want. The guy could move a crowd.
Really could. And this is where people get the comparison between himself and Trump, where they're like, look at all the crowds that he brings in. Look at the nationalism. It's like, yeah, but two things can be common and uncommon at the same time. You know,
Well,
Like-
hey, Hitler said the word "the" once, and Donald Trump says "the" all the time.
Therefore,
Coincidence?
Donald Trump is Hitler.
That's the argument that they make, right? Just because somebody said something in history doesn't mean that you espouse their values. If, for example, I read the dictionary, technically I have read every book in existence. I just got to formulate the words in the right order to get that result.
Yeah, and every CIA document, which by the way, watch out. But yeah, but you know how many leaders have said, "Hey, I'm here to make this country great again, make it the best country on planet Earth, make it,
Swing a cat,
everybody says that."
swing a cat, you'll hit 4 of them.
Yeah, right. Where do you get this shit from, dude? Love it. All right, let's continue. We're almost done.
In the city, the mayor, whom Hitler supported, was an outspoken anti-Semite. There were many right-wing anti-Semitic newsletters, which Hitler took a keen interest in. He bought into the conspiracy theories and became a firm believer in the idea that there are many races in constant struggle with one another, the purest of which were the German Aryan people, and the worst of which, he believed, were Jews. Since Austria-Hungary was a multi-ethnic empire full of lesser races, Hitler wasn't a fan. So when he was 24, he moved to Munich in Germany to avoid doing military service, and for one more year he was a drifter on the streets, until something huge happened. In 1914, long-standing tensions in Europe erupted into the First World War. Crowds across Europe celebrated the news. Within days, Hitler volunteered for the German army. The war gave him a purpose in life. His fellow soldiers gave him friendship and brotherhood. Despite the horrors of war, Hitler considered it to be the best time of his life. He was reportedly a brave soldier and was awarded the Iron Cross, first class. He was also very lucky and had many close encounters with death. His luck ran out in 1916, however, when an artillery shell injured his leg. He went back to Germany to recover and was outraged to find a general apathetic anti-war attitude among the exhausted and hungry German populace. With the war turning against Germany, he returned to the front lines, but was temporarily blinded by a British gas attack in 1918. A month later, still recovering in hospital, Hitler learned of Germany's defeat and surrender. The terms of the peace treaty were tough on Germany. It had to pay a lot of money.
Who remembers that? The Treaty of Versailles.
Ooh, I did. I paid attention in school.
Go.
I'm not going to recite it. I mean,
Well, not
No,
recite it, but I mean, essentially, it was the destruction of the what do you call it? The German economy. That's basically.
it slapped Germany for all of its transgressions.
Mhm.
They were able to fund everything because they had a great economy. Go figure.
Exactly. Well, anyways, so we all know where this is going. So, obviously, the fall of Adolf Hitler, his aggressive expansion led to World War II. Initially successful, the tide turned with key defeats such as Stalingrad in 1943, and then by 1945, Allied forces closed on Berlin. Hitler committed suicide in his bunker, allegedly. On April 30th, 1945, as Soviet troops entered the city, marking the collapse of the Third Reich. The end.
And it's for the best. I mean,
Yeah, it was.
I noticed something when watching this though.
Mhm.
You know, we both watch a fellow named Tim Pool.
Yes.
I now know where they draw this distinction to say Tim is this fascist, far right extremist. It's because Tim's a skateboarder. And there is nothing more iconic in the skateboarding industry than the Iron Cross on a multitude of skateboard products. Therefore, skateboarders are Nazis.
I hope you guys are seeing this logic here. We're obviously being, I don't know, being facetious.
No, I am not being serious. I am just trying to rationalize the. Can I say my favorite word on this show, Roma? Begins with an R.
Shoot.
I'm trying to understand the retardation of society and how they come to these logical conclusions that are so far off base because somebody in the past did a thing and suddenly I am tied to that because I said one word out of this entire 4,000 word speech. It makes no sense.
Yeah, and apparently Ian Crossland, he was a far right extremist. I mean, he only wanted Palestine to be the 51st state.
Dude, I don't know what he was on that night. I'm not going to speculate, but I was floored when he said that.
I think the entire chat stopped. It was like, like, wait, what?
Wait, go back. Did he just say what I think he said? It made no sense. But let's continue on because that's another rabbit hole we don't need to go down tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on to communism. I know we're just BSing now, but we'll push through this next segment. All right, so communism. So what is communism? I believe the oversimplified clips has struck again. So let's find out.
Okay, so now it's time to establish the New World Order. Stalin, you're in charge of Eastern Europe. Now, we want you to let them all hold elections. Oh yes, of course, elections. And these elections will be free and fair, right? Oh yes, certainly, free and fair. Definitely free and fair. Communist, 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 communist. If that's not free and fair, I don't know what is.
I mean, that's how it works, right?
Clearly.
All right. So we got communism is a political and economic ideology aiming at a classless society in which all property and resources are communally owned, and each person contributes and receives according to their ability and needs. The ideology developed by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels seeks to abolish capitalism and private ownership, advocating for a stateless, classless society when means of production are owned collectively.
Now, I'm going to add to your definition here, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
because communism, it exists. It's a thing. It doesn't work. And that clip showed, okay, free and fair elections, right? Yep. Here's the funny thing. People did vote for it, but they called it socialism when they voted for it. You know what happens when you vote for socialism? You get communism as a result. It's not immediate, but it happens.
Every time. Yeah, because it's the same thing, when you have employees, going to the top of companies and saying, hey, we would like you to distribute all of your earnings and trickle it down back to everybody else so we can all have a better life, but not understanding that, like, you're all a part of, this cog. So there's somebody's working a cash register at McDonald's should not be getting a $5 million bonus for working a cash register.
No, because the guy working the cash register, while a very important role, has to plan ahead for the next 5 minutes. The CEO, however, when they're making their plans, they're not thinking about today. I mean, they're not even thinking about this year. They're thinking 5 years down the road, 10 years down the
10
road.
years at least.
Decisions I am making today impact and will alter our entire growth pattern for years to come. Conversely, those decisions will also hold in the balance all the people under them.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of responsibility.
A lot. Because if he makes one wrong decision, then
100,000 people are fired.
Yeah. in a blink of an eye, just like that, you know. So, so how does communism work? Obviously, it works through the establishment of proletarian working class state that controls the means of production. Where that sounds familiar. There's a lot of people coming into the country right now.
Controls the means of production. How do they do that, Roma?
Well, let's start with revolution. The working class overthrows the capitalist system. Then you have the dictatorship of the proletariat.
Proletariat.
Proletariat. I'm sorry. I've seen this word once in high school. All right, leave me alone. It's a temporary state in which the working class holds political power to suppress resistance from the former ruling class. Central planning, a state plans and controls economic production and distribution to ensure equality. And then a classless society, the ultimate goal is dissolution of the state and emergence of a classless, stateless society where resources are distributed based on need. Which is
You know what's
go ahead.
You know what's funny? So communism thus far in history has made it through the revolution, the proletariat, and they start in the central planning, but they never quite finish that one out. They never get the equality going because guess what? The people at the top like what they're getting, and you never get to that classless society because now you still have people at the top.
Yep. And not only do they have all the money, they have all the guns.
Weird how that works.
Exactly. And what are they trying to do here? First, they're trying to take your words away. Then they're trying to take your guns. And they've already taken our money. So, just something to think about. So now let's talk about the rise and fall. So the first person here is going to be Vladimir Lenin.
My favorite guy.
Yeah, your favorite guy.
No.
So let's do a little short on him.
You to bring me this man. Got it. Found him, sir. What? No, not Lenin. Lenin, the Russian communist. What? Why would I need a beetle? Lenin, the Russian communist. He was exiled to Switzerland. You know what? I'll do it myself. Who wants to start a revolution?
Look at that dashing young fellow there. All right. So Vladimir Lenin led the Bolshevik Party during the Russian Revolution of 1917. The Bolsheviks. Oh, man. I love that story. I love every part of it. Capitalizing on discontent with the provisional government and promising peace, land, and bread. The Bolsheviks seized power in October 1917. Lenin established a one-party state and began implementing communist policies. Now, Lenin's health deteriorated after a series of strokes beginning in 1922. He died in 1924, leaving a power vacuum that led to struggle with the Communist Party. His death marked the end of his direct influence, though his ideas continued to shape Soviet policies under his successors. Thoughts?
Communism bad. Don't do communism.
Yes, sir. And then we got Mao Zedong. This guy, he was emerged as the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, of the CCP, during the Long March 1934-1935. After the CCP defeated the nationalists in the Chinese Civil War, Mao proclaimed the People's Republic of China in 1949. He implemented radical land reforms and launched campaigns to transform China into a socialist state. But Mao's later policies, particularly the Great Leap Forward from 58 to 62 and the Cultural Revolution of 66 to 76, led to widespread famine, social chaos, and millions of deaths. Though Mao remained in power until his death in 1976, the later years were marked by declining influence and the failure of his radical policies. Yeah, China wasn't doing very good in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, but it says a lot about Mao, though. I mean, he was basically in power for like 50 years.
Yeah.
Look at all these others that we've talked about tonight. They tried the thing and they suffered under it themselves. He managed to keep it going a very, very long time. And what was his secret? And just kill a couple 100 million people. It's all fine.
Yeah. whether willingly or unwillingly. All right. So now let's talk about the misinterpretations of fascism. So, labeling authoritarianism as fascism, many people label it a form of authoritarian rule as fascism, regardless of whether it fits the historical or ideological specifics of fascism. So, we'll give you an example. Leaders such as Vladimir Putin of Russia and what is that name? Oh my goodness. Type
We
in Erdogan of Turkey, I guess, or
Er-
often labeled as
oh, Erdogan.
Erdogan. There it is. There it is. I promise I can read. Uh, while both exhibiting authoritarian tendencies, their ideologies and practices do not align strictly with fascist principles. Putin's governance focus on nationalism and centralized control, but lacks the corporatist and militaristic components typical of fascism. Um,
And
Erdogan,
it's actually Erdogan, by the way, but
Erdogan,
yeah.
is that what that like U above the G, Erdogan?
Yeah, a lot of the European countries did this thing, and it makes no sense.
Yeah, the further east I go in Europe, the names just bleh. Yeah. So, so Erdogan's regime, while increasingly autocratic, is rooted in the blend of Islam and Turkish nationalism, which differs from the secular, racially defined nationalism in historic fascist regimes. Yeah, because I guess in Russia there really isn't like a military presence amongst its own people. I mean, there is a military presence, but not.
It's because the people are the military effectively, because they can tell you it's not a draft. It's just you're serving today. Go. Um, and I think that's something that's missed. But it's interesting what you say. So, yes, they exhibit the authoritarianism identified in fascism, but they're missing other components to it. It's not a buffet line here. You just pick and choose which parts you want to apply to that.
Mhm.
Either it is or it isn't.
Right, right. And if you look at the United States, I mean, people out here can correct me if I'm wrong. The executive branch is sort of authoritarian almost because there's one man at the top.
Which
But if you
it's
look at
supposed to be.
yeah, but when you look at the legislative branch, it's more democratic. Whereas the judicial branch, well, I guess the judicial branch is more oligarch.
There's a lot of parliamentary circumstance in it. Yeah.
Mhm. Right. So, I mean, it's just our country is just a mix of all the good of these different things, and they at least attempted to leave out the bad.
And they're supposed to check the others so those bad things don't come in.
Right, right. And as far as term limits, Supreme Court, it's a lifetime appointment. If you're in Congress, you can be there for life as long as you're voted in. And then of course for presidency, you only get 8 years maximum.
But remember, this was not part of our founding, mind you. When the country was founded, I mean, technically George Washington, he served 4 terms, I believe it was,
Mhm.
and he finally said, no more, I'm done. Nobody should be serving at the top for this long, otherwise you get that whole king aspect. And it wasn't until 1945 we actually did put a term limit in place, an official term limit for the president. Now,
Mhm.
I personally believe they should have done that for all branches of the government. Just
Mhm.
saying.
Well, some may be different because personally for myself, I mean, I think 20 years in Congress is good. Do your 20 years and then, you know, get your pension.
Oh, that's all. That's way too loosey goosey for me.
What
I
do you
I
think it
say
should be like?
I say 12 years.
12 years?
That is 6 congressional terms or 2 Senate terms. If you can't get done in 12 years what you intend to get done for your constituents, I don't want you there any further anyway.
Right. Well, I guess that does make sense because you can't really serve 20 years as a senator. but
No.
but yeah, I guess you're right. I guess you're right. So what you can do is Yeah, after that amount of years, I mean, how old do you have to be a senator? 25? Is it
29.
29? So if you start at 29, let's say 30, just to make it easy, all the way up to 42, and then boom, you're out. Go have a nice life.
Yeah, you can go do speaking engagements. You can go do a lot of things. You can start run members of boards, for example. I mean, hell, you don't even need the time in Senate to do that. Look at Hunter.
Yeah, sorry about it. Well, anyways, so let's go over the misinterpretations of fascism and communism, and also I found this one video. This guy is Illustrate to Educate, and what he does is he draws like different diagrams as he's speaking about it, which is pretty cool. It's only about 4 minutes long, so let's go from here. Here we go.
Hey, it's Dan Zimmerman. Welcome to Illustrate to Educate. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support more simple and objective videos on topics that matter. What is fascism?
The reason why I'm doing these videos is because anybody that watches my show, I want them to be able to come away with some type of knowledge. Okay. And because I'm sick and tired of people going out and saying that, you know, Trump is a communist and Biden's a fascist, and it's just like, wait a minute, what? I actually got that as a message on 2 different threads yesterday.
Well, and don't take away what we're saying is 100% fact.
Right.
I read a lot. You read a lot.
Mhm.
But what we say is our interpretation based on what we've read. That's not always the correct thing. And I'm happy to have that conversation. But again, you got these people doing these videos where it's straight facts. Here is what it is. Political spin aside. And it's important to remember that.
Yeah, and if you disagree, you disagree. But don't just come out and say that we're wrong because you just don't like who's presenting the message. Like, that makes no sense. But anyways, let's continue.
In this video, we'll dive into everything you need to know about it. Fascism is a complex and mutable political ideology, but is typically defined as a far-right, authoritarian, ultranationalist political ideology and movement, characterized by a dictatorial leader, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, belief in a natural social hierarchy, subordination of individual interests for the perceived good of the nation and race, and strong regimentation of society and the economy.
Pause this.
The word comes from the Italian.
You got to get the whole graphic there.
Oh, hold up. Let me go back. Oops.
Okay, so notice the things he's saying here. It's typically a far right thing. It's not a guarantee that it's far right, mind you.
Mm-hmm.
So let's check off the boxes. Authoritarian. We did this earlier, right?
Yep.
Weird. Joe kind of fits that box of authoritarian. Listen to what I'm saying. Only I can do this, right? Supreme Court said I can't. I'm still going to give those student loan bailouts.
Mm-hmm.
Ultranationalist. It's there, but it's not. Autocracy. One person in absolute power. I'm going to do this for the American people because I say it can be done. That's weird. I'm seeing a lot of Joe going on here. Interest in the good of the nation. I can use the military for whatever purpose I need. That, again, we're seeing it play out in all of our foreign policies at the moment. And it requires one person at the top to say what's good for society and the economy. We've checked all the boxes here, Roma.
Every single one. And then also that one where it's the interest, the good of the nation. So what are they doing? They're silencing their critics, going against their constitutional rights. And they're not doing it themselves. What they're doing is they're using their agencies to go in and basically, you know, like ninjas and playing watch over everything that comes out. I mean, when you look at the 51 intelligence agents that signed off on what was it? It was Hunter Biden's laptop.
The laptop, yeah, they all said it bears the hallmarks of Russian disinformation. Every single one of them, and they all had access to this a year prior to even having to make that letter, and they knew better. They knew at the time
Exactly
what it was.
It would have been a 17% swing of votes. 17% if they would have known that information. But anyways,
all because the people that they tell you should trust used that trust and abused it.
Yeah, and this is why we're doing this episode. Continue.
Economy. The word comes from the Italian fascio, meaning a bundle or a group, and is considered a term for a militant brotherhood. The word fasces means an axe tightly bound with sticks, an image that became a symbol of the fascist movement. The symbolism of fasces suggests strength through unity. A single rod is easily broken, while the bundle is difficult to break. Fascism came to prominence in the 1920s and 1930s in Europe. The most notorious examples of fascist governments have been Benito Mussolini's National Fascist Party in Italy from 1922 to 1943 and Adolf Hitler's National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazi Party, from 1933 to 1945. Other countries have also been ruled in the 20th century by fascist regimes, such as Francisco Franco in Spain and Juan Perón in Argentina. According to some definitions, fascism rejects assertions that violence is inherently bad and views imperialism, political violence, and war as a means to national rejuvenation. Fascists often advocate for the establishment of a totalitarian one-party state and for a dirigist economy with the principal goal of achieving autarky, national economic self-sufficiency, through protectionist and economic interventionist policies. Fascism's extreme authoritarianism and nationalism often manifests as belief in racial purity or a master race, usually blended with some variant of racism or bigotry against a demonized other, such as what was seen with Jews during the Hitler era.
All right. So so one party check. All right. So there is no elections, there are no, um rise to prominence of other people, because once you have that money and all that power, like we talked about before, then you have all of the workings of the ability to use the military might and all of your intelligence against anybody else who tries to rise up against, regardless of whether you're right or wrong.
You mean like court cases that have no bearing on anything?
Yeah, like paying off porn stars.
Yeah, things that are perfectly legal, but we're going to make a court case about it. Weird.
Yeah, exactly. And national rejuvenation, I can see that with Trump.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. You can see that with him. And listen, I'm going to call a spade, all right? Anything I see here that represents Trump, I'm going to call it out.
Oh, I actually see a couple things on here that I would call out Trump for. That being one of them.
Exactly. So you got the national rejuvenation, nationalism, government. What's this? The government over the economy.
That I see that. I mean, that's our regulatory agencies. They're tipping the hands on scale, favoring one thing over another, saying, "No, you got to do it this way. It's the only way the economy for all can survive."
Right. Is that similar to the what is it, the John Adams? Was it John Adams or was it Hamilton? And talking about the banking system and interest rates and stuff like that.
Hamilton, I believe.
Yeah. Is it something similar to that, you think?
There could be a case made that way. Yeah.
Okay. That's what I figured. All right, let's move on.
Ideas such as these have motivated fascist regimes to commit genocides, massacres, forced sterilizations, mass killings, and forced deportations.
Ooh, sterilizations.
Since the end of
Which one? Let me see. Where was it? No, so we got genocides. No, we don't.
Well,
we don't do that.
no. You got to think of genocides not just as people that are walking this earth today.
Mhm.
There's this other genocide that happens that people are fighting for their ability to do right now. What was that? Begins with an A. Think about it. Abortion.
Oh,
Sterilizations. Anyone get the jab?
yeah, right. Yeah, and that'd be under sterilizations, deportations. I mean, that's what's happening now here, but in a completely different context.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a mixed bag. You got to look at that one differently because it's people came here without authorization. Yes, they need to be deported. That's the way it works.
yeah, I don't think there's anybody here that's advocating for absolute, like, no one can come into our country at all under any circumstance unless you're a specific. No, then nobody is saying that on either side. So
No,
I don't understand where this idea is that, deportations are racist when they're deporting all different types of people.
it's because Orange Man bad.
I, all right. All right. All right. You know what? I'll leave it at that. Go.
Since the end of World War II in 1945, few parties have openly described themselves as fascists. The term is more often used derogatorily by political opponents.
Yes.
The descriptions of neo-fascists and post-fascists are sometimes employed to describe contemporary parties with ideologies similar to or rooted in 20th century fascist movements.
Exactly. This is what we're talking about. It's, there's a piece of it that makes sense in the type of government that you're trying to run, or the type of either ideology or policies that you want to get in, but that there's many circles of different other governments that fall into those categories as well.
Yeah, just because you took an idea that was founded in that, or most commonly found there, not founded necessarily as it is, but you could find it as part of fascism, doesn't mean that you're fascist in your policy. It's
Exactly.
because it applied to what was needed to be done.
Right. For example, like, of course we'll go back to Trump because I mean he's in the news all over the place. Here in Modi in India, they're frequently called fascists due to their strong nationalist rhetoric. Yeah. So, however, Trump's America First policies, and then the promotion of Hinduism in India, they don't necessarily equate to fascism.
No,
because that involves much more extreme and comprehensive control over society. He doesn't want to control society. He just wants society to be better, and they want to get back to their roots of what made the country great in the first place, minus all of the bad stuff. Yes, slavery was bad. Yes, putting,
Roma, you can't have an opinion on slavery. Oh, wait, you probably can. I'm not allowed one. But
no, of course not. I
here,
can't.
I'll put my blackface on. No, never mind.
Don't do that. I like you, man. I don't want you to disappear. No, I'm just kidding.
But no. I mean, yes, there have been bad things that have happened in the last 248 years that we can all today agree were bad.
Mm-hmm.
I don't support those things. Throughout my entire life, I have not supported those things, but it is still okay to say that things have been good at periods throughout history.
Yeah, especially when you were talking about like the big boom in the 1950s, after World War II. And then, of course, the boomer generation where everybody was having children. Everybody survived off of one income in a household.
I don't even know what that looks like.
I do.
I mean, technically, I suppose I do. I'm not married. I don't have kids. So I do survive off of one income. But that's not the same situation.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Let's see, what do we got? Got about 40 seconds left.
Core fascist ideologies and goals similar to those of Hitler and Mussolini are still present in populist organizations today and continue to shape fascist movements in countries around the world, particularly where their leaders are, number one, someone who claims to speak for a whole nation or group, two, is utterly unconcerned with the rights of others, and three, is willing to use violence and whatever other means are necessary to achieve the goals he or she might have. Some opposition groups have adopted the
Antifa.
So the number 2, this is an interesting bullet point.
label anti.
Boom. There it is. I said it and then he wrote it. Like that's I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You mean Antifa?
Yeah, but so you got number 2's bullet point. Look at that. The rights of others.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, both sides have this one aspect going for them, and they're on opposite sides of what they're determining that. I mentioned it earlier, the right to an abortion. Half the country says no, the other half says yes, but it's all about trampling on the other's rights. And I think it's wrong because, hey, a life is a life. They should have the rights to continue on. The other side said, my body, my choice. They have a right in that regard too. And this is such a divisive topic. I don't think there's any one right answer, but both sides have a fascist component to it.
Yeah, they really do. You know, and I would even go even further and talk about like the right to defend yourself, you know, the Second Amendment, and how you can make arguments about, oh, well, it's bad, so we must limit the ability of the people that are law-abiding citizens, but yet won't say anything about the people who aren't law-abiding citizens who are causing all these problems in the first place in order for you to have a Second Amendment to defend yourself. So it's like this just this giant circle of disingenuous mislogic that keeps going in. But
It's funny how that goes.
right, we definitely have to do a Second Amendment episode at some point. All right, we're gonna watch the rest of this, and then I'm gonna fly through the next one, and then we'll get out of here. So let's see.
By fascist or Antifa to signify their stance.
Yeah,
What are your
We should have stopped already.
Yeah, I know, right? I don't even know why I started, but there is one more, and that is the communist side. Once again, I want to make sure that everybody understands the differences between the two, because I remember somebody stated that they're both socialist in a way.
There are elements, yeah.
Yeah, there are elements. One probably more than the other, but either way, the main thing is the concentration of power.
Yeah, it's the people at the top.
Yeah, exactly. Or one is it's the concentration of power into one person versus the concentration of power into everybody.
Yes,
That's the difference. But all right,
it's a lot of concentrating.
A lot of concentrating. All right, and here we go.
Welcome to Illustrate to Educate. Please subscribe and ring the bell for more simple and objective videos on topics that matter. In this video, we're going to look at a simple explanation of communism, as well as an explanation for private property, examples of communism, and lastly, the pros and cons of communism. Communism is a political and economic ideology that advocates for the establishment of a classless society in which all resources and wealth are owned and controlled by the community as a whole. The goal of communism is to create a society in which the means of production are owned by the people, and goods and services are distributed according to the needs of the community. In this system, there is no private property, and all individuals work together to create a society that is free from economic and social inequality. Private property is a fundamental concept within the communist ideology, and it is one of the main issues that distinguishes communism from other economic systems. In communism, private property refers to the means of production, such as factories, land, and machinery, which are typically owned and controlled by individuals or corporations. Communists believe that private property leads to economic inequality and exploitation, as the owners of these means of production can use them to extract profit from the labor of others. They argue that private property.
Okay, well, how are you supposed to get paid?
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
somebody has to come up with something of value to provide to people in order for those things to be made. In order for those things to be made, there needs to be people that are willing to work and make those things in order for
To take that risk.
yeah, and to be able to take that risk initially. Nothing just comes out of thin air. Somebody has to come up with the idea, and it has and not everyone is going to just jump.
The idea, I mean, if you truly expand it out, go to the service industry. Roma, you work in the service industry, right?
Mhm.
You provide a service to people to fix their items. That is saying that you do not own the rights to your own self. That is literally saying, Roma, we the people own your labor.
Exactly. So essentially, I go to a house, I perform a service, they pay me for that service, and that's the trade-off. All right. That's sort of like I guess you could say capitalistic, but that's logic. All
Yeah.
right. What they're saying under communism is that I go to your place and fix it, and then assume that any type of service that I need for myself, somebody else is going to be available to do so for me
Yes.
at no cost.
Because the system owns everything, and therefore that's how we all get paid. Except that last part never actually ends up happening.
Exactly. And of course, like how do you determine the cost of products and services if nobody is paying for those said services? Because I mean, as much as I would love to be an astronaut, my ass is not going into space to fix
It's
a
not.
satellite or going deep down in the ocean to fix some, some oil well or rig.
I got some good news for you, Roma.
Hmm.
Under communism, you wouldn't have to worry about going into space because there's no reason to innovate to get us to space.
That's how it works. Okay. So there's no satellite TV, no.
Well, what do you need satellite TV for? That just brings choices, and you don't get choices. You get what we tell you need.
Geez, communism's great then. Holy shit. I'll just go to the beach every day and have somebody bring me cocktails. I mean, that's communism, right?
But you don't get to go to the beach either.
Oh man, all right. I'll step off that. I keep rambling on about sweet nothings.
Property is a form of theft, as it allows individuals to take the fruit of others' labors without contributing anything themselves. In a communist system, private property is abolished, and the means of production are owned and controlled by the community as a whole. This means that everyone has equal access to resources and wealth, and that the community collectively decides how resources are allocated and how work is organized. However, it is important to note that the concept of private property within communism does not necessarily mean that individuals cannot own personal possessions. For example, individuals may still own their own homes, clothing, and personal items. The distinction is between personal property, which is owned for individual use, and private property, which is owned for the purpose of extracting profit from the labor of others. The origins of communism can be traced back to the writings of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels in their book, The Communist Manifesto, published in 1848. They laid out the
I really need to read this book.
You don't want to, but you need to.
I was going to say, that's why I said I need to, not I want.
basic principles of communism, arguing that the capitalist system was inherently flawed and would eventually be replaced by a socialist system, which would in turn lead to communism. According to Marx and Engels, capitalism created a society in which the wealthy controlled the means of production, while the working class was.
You know, it's funny how when you look at what's going on in our country right now, and how they're trying to create like all these socialistic programs, saying that capitalism doesn't work, but yet they're using the fruits of capitalism to run their socialist agenda.
See, now you're cooking with fire.
Yeah. My producer said who said they were socialists, didn't say they were hypocrites. That's funny.
Was exploited and forced to sell their labor for low wages. They argued that this system was unsustainable and that the only way to create a truly just society was to abolish private property and create a system in which the means of production were owned by the people. In a communist society, the government controls all aspects of the economy and resources are distributed based on need rather than profit. This means that everyone has access to the basic necessities of life, such as food, housing, and healthcare, regardless of their social status or wealth. However,
Who
the
determines
implementation
need?
of communist.
Which one?
Who determines need?
Right. Because of course somebody has to run something. You know,
Just imagine. Okay, I'll use one of the more extreme examples. I'm 65 years old. I'm not actually 65, guys. And I'm noticing some joint pains in my hip. Under communism, it would say everyone gets what they need. Well, do you need to be replacing my hip, giving me a full hip surgery at 65 when I can't provide that value back into the system? It would instead say, well, this 20-year-old who is got many, many years of contribution left in them, their need is prioritized over mine. In capitalism, which is great, I can say I have the ability to buy this service, and my need is based on the fact that I believe that I need that hip.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You know, and that seems to be the one thing that I always think about in going back to where capitalism comes in and then everybody extracts from capitalism. Yeah, we have taxes. There are parts of our society that are socialist. You know, we have our Social Security, we have different entitlement programs, Medicare, things like that. That worked for a long time, but now what's happening is that our population is aging, and there's more older people that can't give back into society because they've already done their due diligence. So not only can they not go back to work, but they're holding uh all of their assets. You know, they're not redistributing them back out in any way. So how exactly do we grow as a country if you can't if you don't have access to those things?
Welcome to the conversation.
Hey, I did it. All right. Anyway, I don't think we need to watch the rest of this. I think we've pretty much figured that out.
Yeah, communism bad. It makes zero sense. I don't care who you're arguing with. It's never been tried. It's been tried a lot of times, and it has never been tried successfully because it can't be tried successfully.
Right. And what happens is, you know, the confusion blurs the lines between advocating for increased social welfare and the radical restructuring of society that communist entails, but leading to misunderstandings about goals and methods from
I take my statement back. Communism will be successfully implemented if we ever get to that Terminator universe where the machines truly have taken over and AI controls everything. If you left it up to AI, the capitalist society is what would come out of it.
Oh, absolutely.
Or not the capitalist, but the communist society, because it would make all the calculations say everybody needs X, and that's how it would be distributed.
Exactly. All right. Well, you know what else gets distributed evenly, right? Name that bill. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Name That Bill. It's a chance for you and the audience to expose our lawmakers' ridiculous initiatives. I'm going to give you 5 potential laws that have passed here in the U.S., and it is your job in the audience or in the chat to help us spot the fake bill. All right.
That's a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure. All right. So let's start off with bill number 1 or law number 1. This is from Nevada. It is against the law to wear a tuxedo while riding a bicycle. Number 2 is from Montana. You are not permitted to wear cowboy boots unless you already own at least 2 cows. Number 3 is Kansas. Saying the name George Washington without adding the phrase "blessed be his name" can land you with a fine of up to 50 cents.
Oh, that's real.
Number 4, biting someone with your natural teeth is simple assault, while biting someone with your false teeth is aggravated assault, from Louisiana.
You're using a tool. I can see that being a thing.
Well, I mean, you're using a weapon technically.
Now, weapons are tools.
Yeah, exactly. All right. And then the final is a Minnesota law states that a wife's hair legally belongs to her husband.
Say that again.
Minnesota law states that a wife's hair legally belongs to her husband.
Well, that only works if. Never mind. Oof.
Yeah, I know. This is
I don't know. I don't know.
I knew I had to get you this week because you've been too much on a roll.
I'm thinking number 1 is the fake one, but I gotta hear these all one more time.
All right. So Nevada, it is against the law to wear a tuxedo while riding a bicycle. In Montana, you are not permitted to wear cowboy boots unless you already own at least 2 cows. Kansas, saying the name George Washington without adding the phrase "blessed be his name" can land you with a fine of up to 50 cents. Louisiana, biting someone with your natural teeth is simple assault, while biting someone with your false teeth is aggravated assault. And number 5, Minnesota law states that a wife's hair legally belongs to her husband.
I gotta go with number 1.
Is that your final answer?
Sadly, yes, it is.
All right. Well, the first real law goes to Kansas. Saying a name George Washington without adding a phrase "blessed be his name" can land you with a fine of up to 50 cents. Now, 50 cents, I mean, this must be something.
It's a very old law.
Yeah, it's got to be very, very old. All right. Let's see. The next real U.S. law is Montana. You are not permitted to wear cowboy boots unless you already own at least 2 cows.
I'm feeling good about my choice now.
Law. The very next real U.S. law is Minnesota. Law states that a wife's hair legally belongs to her husband. How do you feel now?
You know, no, I'm still not going to make the joke that I was going to make, but that goes back to the old laws of, you know, rule of thumb. If you know the meaning behind that one, it was legal for you to let's use common terminology, abuse your wife as long as you used a stick that was no bigger than your thumb. So
I'm gonna have to look this up. I have to look this up.
There is a basis for some of this rationale.
Are you sure? I'm sorry, I'm talking to my producer. He's like, that was never a law, was it?
I actually believe it was a law in the books. It used to be legal.
Oh, man. All right. Well, the last real U.S. law comes to you from the state of Louisiana. Biting someone with your natural teeth is simple assault, while biting someone with your false teeth is aggravated assault. Chris, you've done it again.
So I'm going to help the audience out here. Pay attention to the laws Roma puts up there. You're going to find there's always two that are very similar. In this case, you can't wear something or you have to wear something. And then it's a 50-50 choice between those two.
Something like that. I mean, sometimes if you went back a couple weeks ago, I had one where we were talking about service animals.
Yeah.
Yeah. And every single one was about a service animal. Yeah. Those are the ones I typically win. But outside of that, I can't get anything past you, Chris. I'm going to have to start changing up my game.
I'll find your system again and I'll crack it. But no, that one just seemed weird because Vegas is a weird place.
Vegas is. Oh my goodness. Well, anyways, Chris, thanks again, man. You came in at 0 hour once again and saved the day.
Hopefully, I provided intelligent conversation for you and didn't derail too much.
Mm-hmm.
One of these days, I am going to get you on my show.
Yes.
I'm near to the point where I'm going to start doing some live stuff here and there. Not quite there, but soon. Right now, I'm doing a lot of music reactions, and I'm having fun with those. Mm-hmm. Even though politics is now entering into those conversations, weirdly enough.
Like everything else.
Yeah, it's just a good time. It's a great way to break something down and say, ooh, I understand this deeper meaning without actually going into politics, which is great. Because right now is a dangerous time to be in politics, and you're going to probably piss off more people than you please. But I like what you do here because you take the actual ideology out of it and just say what is. So I'm always happy to be here to help you out.
Absolutely. Well, definitely appreciate it. And make sure that you guys tune in next week on the second portion of This Versus That. This time it's going to be pinning Project 2025 versus Agenda 2030.
Ooh, I'm going to watch that.
Yeah,
I am going to watch that.
This is going to be something because I'm going to piss off everybody.
I'll make you a bet. I'll make a bet you're not going to piss me off.
Probably not. But anybody that's not on this stage right now.
That's fair.
There we go. All right. Once again, thank you guys for joining us here on ROMA Nation Saturday nights. I'm AK, your favorite guy. We're going to be signing out here. Chris, you got any final thoughts?
Check me out, Quiet Part Pod. I have a good time with that. Hopefully you enjoy it. Leave a like, comment, subscribe here. Go there, do the same thing, and together we'll all grow.
There we go. All right. Well, I want to go ahead and thank you guys for joining us tonight. This is AK signing out. Peace.